you are going to alienate the audience that has lived with these stories for decades.
We have this quote here. We actually have two quotes. I don't know if you want to turn around. I know we said you weren't allowed to look at it at first, and now we have the big reveal. And I'm assuming you probably know these quotes. Maybe you don't, but I don't know if you want to read them for our audience.
I would like to, yes.
Okay, great.
We made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics, our own messages, or our own themes into these movies. In a way, we were trying to make these films for him, the author, not for ourselves. Well, that's Peter Jackson, and he's talking about J.R.R. Tolkien. And this was his idea when they began to work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And arguably, the Lord of the Rings trilogy of movies is the most successful, one of the most successful trilogies in all of movie history. And I say this for a couple reasons. One, we don't talk about it very often. And I mean that in a good way, meaning we're not trying to wrestle with its failure. We're not saying, well, the third movie didn't land. You could say that for Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. You could say that. You could even say that for the original trilogy. For some, the Return of the Jedi did not completely work. So many trilogies or film franchises, you know, this is, I think, where the term stick the landing came from. And, you know, Peter Jackson was able to do that. And I think it was because he stuck with this philosophy from the beginning. He trusted in the story. He trusted in the source material. He had the utmost respect for it. And yes, he made changes to make it translatable to the screen in a way that would appeal to people who are not fans of the source material of the original books, of which I am one. I've never read the books, not to say that I wouldn't be a fan if I would read them, but sword and sandal, wizardry, that kind of, it's not my personal favorite thing. I'm more of a science fiction buff when it comes to genre material that I like. So the fact that I'm a fan of the Lord of the Rings films because of how successfully it was pulled off, I think that's saying something. And I think it really comes from that first trailer. The first trailer for the first Lord of the Rings film, when you go back and watch the preceding trailers, really got you engaged in Frodo's story and gave you a glimpse into what this journey would be like and what the stakes were. And also the music's amazing. But if you watch the original trailers for the very first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring, it gives me chills just even thinking about it. Conversely, with the Amazon series, which is being made for money, which you could argue all movies are made for money. But I think when also it's coming from a need to creatively express something, I think that's much more powerful. And when you compare the original trailer for the first Lord of the Rings movie with this current upcoming Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power, it just seems like no comparison. To me, that trailer looks like dollar store Game of Thrones. It looks fairly generic. You know, there are other criticisms about the look of it not being, faithful to the source material. I can't speak to that because I've never read those books. I just love a great story. It's not present. Yes, it's a teaser trailer, so let's cut it some slack. I am hoping that even though this quote is from Peter Jackson, that the makers of the new Lord of the Rings series would keep some philosophy like that in mind. In fact, that's actually a very good guide for any person who is embarking on the journey of making a franchise project for which they did not create that franchise. That's a good mission statement.
We have a second quote.
No, let's read the second quote.
Yes, let's. Okay.
It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of the author's work would reflect what the world actually looks like. I believe, I don't know who said that, but I believe that is from the makers of the new Lord of the Rings of Power. And my concern about that is that they're already giving themselves an out to stray from the original source material. Tolkien made a world that looked like, well, the world he created. I don't understand why you would stray from that. I can get, what their corporate reasons are, but I think a more compelling reason would be the creative reasons for that. It to me, that statement, that quote is an excuse to turn it into something that I mean, what are they going to do? The concerns of, what are they going to do? They're going to put hip hop music in there because hip hop is very popular. Is that what they're going to be doing? It's whenever they do that. I mean, I've noticed it in previous franchises. Well, this is, especially in particular, music is the thing. Like, well, this is the popular music now. So let's have somebody sing a rap song in a Star Trek movie. Okay. Those things always, they never work. And what it does is it dates it. And what I think that tends to work better is sort of a timelessness to the storytelling. Yeah. So that second quote is really troubling to me. It's corporate speak for, we're going to do whatever the hell we want, and damn your allegiance or love of this franchise, because we're just going to do what we think is right. And I don't agree with that.
Speaking of Tolkien and like old books, I was watching a quick trailer on a woman who runs an old bookstore and about collectibles. Mm-hmm. And she said, basically, when we get these old books, we need to take very good care of them. And we need to know we're just kind of keeping them for future generations. Because when we pass on, someone else will be getting this book. And we're sort of like keepers of the book. Do you feel like, in some sense, it's the same thing with the storytelling? Like we're really just here for future generations, making sure that it's preserved.
Well, I love that sentiment, and I hope it holds. But I think we're living at a time now where everything creative is being undone and remade, and not with the interests of preserving the original author's intention, whatever era that person came from. So I love that, because I am someone who still goes to used bookstores. So I love that sentiment. I have concerns that the same respect is not being paid by the corporations that purchase these franchises for the purposes of updating them and, adding things that just don't work, they just stand out, and they just, it's like, oh, they're doing an update. Well, that's over. I mean, you see it in desperation. There are certain sort of tropes of things that would happen. I mean, they call it in television, they call it jumping the shark, right? In the Happy Days television show, when they did like this two-parter where Fonzie is something you would never see. Fonzie's, he's water skiing, and you see a shark, and he literally jumps over this incline over the shark. He jumps the shark. This is now happening in movies, right? It happens a lot you always knew a franchise was over when they would bring in a cute character. In older television shows, they bring in some cute younger character because some of the child actors had already aged up. It's the Cousin Oliver syndrome. Look that up, Brady Bunch. It's a reference. I'm dating myself, but and they even made a joke about it in The Simpsons. With Itchy and Scratchy, they brought in a character called Poochie, which was a skateboard riding, backwards baseball cap animal character that rapped. And Poochie was meant to appeal to the kids. And that is a very simplified version of exactly what we're discussing right now. It's when you're updating it to a modern audience, you run the risk of, one, creatively, it's not gonna work. And secondly, you are going to alienate the audience that has lived with these stories for decades and probably read it when they were younger and have visions in their mind that are better than a movie that you could ever make. So That quote is very troubling to me.
The latter one.
Yes, that last quote is very troubling to me.